Well, you can turn over to Luke chapter 19. Children's Church can be dismissed with Mr. Scott and Miss Annette right back here. There you go. Have a great time. We'll see you in just a little bit. Luke chapter 19. Put your finger in there and then turn on over to the next book, John. John chapter 20. Put your finger there. And then flip back over to Luke 19. Here's what it says in Luke 19, verse 10. Jesus says, "For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost." His desire was to give up what he had for you and I. That was his sole purpose. He came to seek and to save the lost. I do know about you. I know this. You were lost and bound and destined for hell without Jesus Christ. He came for the purpose to drag you out of what was your destiny without Him, to change your life forever, that you will be with Him for eternity. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. That tells us that He came for a purpose. He was looking for you. For many of us in here, my prayer is that He has found you. More so, that you have found Him. Turn back over to John chapter 20. His purpose was restated for us. He came to seek and to save the lost. And that changed your purpose. John chapter 20, verse 21. Jesus tells His disciples, that's you and me. He says, "Peace to you. As the Father has sent me, I also send you." This is your mission. This is what you are called to do. You are to become contagious. That's what it is. You are to spread like a wildfire. You, not just you, but He in you, is to change the world. That's what you're called to do. My experience of being on staff at churches, it's enough to keep me from wanting to be on staff at church. There you go. That's the truth. I thank you. I thank you for allowing me to be bivocational. It changed my life. And so, when God called me to ministry, I just knew He was calling me to full-time vocational ministry, and that He was calling me out of my secular job, which was a nurse in the military. I was an Army nurse. And you've heard the story. I've told you the story. You know, I was destined for a career in the Army. The only thing that was going to make me get out of the Army was me. And so that's the way I went into it. And then God said, watch this. And God calls me out. And I just knew God was calling me out of my secular job into full-time ministry. And I took a position as a full-time youth leader in San Antonio. 9 months later, I knew that I misread what God was calling me to do. I just knew it. And I knew that I was called to minister. But my mistake was to think that I was called out of the world to stay out of the world. That was my mistake. And Bob and I have had this discussion multiple times over the past year or so about how our calling isn't necessarily what we think it has to be. God has a great sense of humor, doesn't He, Bob? And you know, I say often, I'm bivocational, but I work outside the church to pay the bills, and that's it. It's not because I'm trying to do anything different. But my experience about being on staff, it was enough to tell me, I really don't want to be on staff like that anymore. Because I found that we start worrying. When you are on staff at church, you start worrying about the workings of the church. And I lost sight of the reason why I was at church in the first place. My fear is that we get to where we forget those values, those things which are valued by God. Luke chapter 19, verse 10. He came to seek and to save the lost. John chapter 20, verse 21 says that as the Father has sent me, Jesus says this, as the Father has sent me, so I send you. Who is he talking to? Raise your hand. He's talking to each and every one of us. I believe that we, as Journey Church, and as I think about what we're going to be talking about today, and what Chip and Matt are going to come up here and share with you, as I think about these things, I believe that it is very evident that we need to be a contagious church. I go back and I reference a pastor by the name of Bill Hybels, because he wrote a book about being a contagious Christian. I believe we take it a step further. We are to be a contagious church. Building upon what Bob brought us last week, and as he was teaching us, we have to quit being so egocentric. We have to quit being so worried about the workings of the church, and we need to be the church. Do you understand what I mean? Let me explain a little bit to you. If we're going to be a contagious church, we have to know why we're doing this in the first place. And the fact is, we have to know what really matters to us is what should matter to God. What I'm saying is what we value should be what He values. Do you agree? So we participate right now in the things that affect what we value. And if we value seeing this church being built as an icon of our faith, then we're building a church for the wrong reason. You know what I'm saying? If we're building this church, if we're maintaining this building, if we're keeping this corner of the city to ourselves, and we're doing it because we want someone to look at this corner and say, look at that church right now. That is an awesome church. I want all churches modeled after that church right there. If we're doing that for that reason, then we're doing it for the wrong reason, because we're not called to be icons of the faith. We're called to be builders of the faith based upon what God has already put into us through His Son, Jesus Christ. Amen? So, instead, we have to have our sights on reaching secular people in our increasingly post-Christian world, in our post-Christian society. They don't care. Like I was praying a minute ago. They don't care that you're a Christian. In fact, they despise you because you're a Christian. We have to focus our sights on reaching out to secular people. We must step back and we have to figure out what our own mission field's cultural landscape looks like. We need to know what we're up against. We also need to determine what values will have to be reinforced in ourselves and other church leaders as we send a legacy, a legacy of faith, not for our own purpose, but for the purpose of God's mission for our church, see? And so we have to effectively embark on an evangelistic adventure. This is our journey. That's who we are. So what do we value? We consider our church's values, our collective church's values. We use the, what's that called, acrostic? Faith. Is that where you use the first letter of each thing? Thanks. Okay. So, faith, family. We value family. We value authenticity. We value instruction. We value transformation. And we value hands-on ministry. These are the things we say we value as a church. Do we exhibit that? We're going to see in a minute. As these guys come up here in just a minute, we're going to see what we value. And does it make sense, or are we just blowing and going, trying to make ourselves look good? I don't think so. But this is our agreed upon church values. But what do they mean if we don't understand the biblical principles for having values in the first place? That author I was telling you about, that pastor, Bill Hybels, he writes down about some vital values that people need to have in order to be a contagious Christian. I believe that it applies to us as a contagious church. And the first one is this. We should understand that people matter to God. Someone told me one time, it was our director of missions, Steve Patterson, he said, don't feel bad about counting people. Because I used to say, I don't count people. It was 2 or 2,000, it doesn't matter. And he said, quit making an excuse for it. He said, you do too count. If you say you're not counting, you're lying. And the fact is, I was lying. I didn't mean to, it just was, you know. You look around. I walked in this morning. Before everybody got in here, I walked in, I looked around, I was like, we don't have that many people today. He said, quit apologizing for counting. Do you know why? Because God knows every hair on your head. Obviously, He knows how to count. And what I'm saying, what He said to me there and what it taught me in that moment is, don't apologize for counting, because every person here matters to God. People matter to God. We ought to be able to look back and say about the ministry of the church, here's what we've spent our time and our energy trying to reach people outside of the family of God. We ought to be able to look back and say, this is what we've done. And we can count it, can't we, Matt? We can count what we've done, some really silly things that we've done, and some very effective things also. We've done some whatever it takes to reach people for the cause of Christ. That's what we need to stand and say. We're willing to do whatever it takes. If it makes us look silly in the society, I don't care, but we're going to do whatever it takes. I'm pretty good at looking silly. I'm a pro at it, if you ask me. And so we should be able to open our checkbook and look at the ledger and say, here's what I've invested my resources to help make evangelism happen among the people around us. And here's what we've done as far as our budget in the church. We're buying Bibles, we're buying books, we're buying worship CDs and giving those to people. We're going out and we're buying clothes for people that need clothes. We're helping people if they can't, if they can't make it here and trying to make a dollar stretch where we can. And we don't have endless resources, but we need to be able to look back and say we've done whatever we could do in that moment in order to make it happen. Not in order to, what do you call that? Not in order to basically just to teach someone to bring themselves out of that situation. Not to dig them out ourselves, A friend at Watered Gardens, he said, I remember his commercial on the radio. He said, you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. You teach him to fish, he eats for a lifetime. You remember that commercial on the radio? That sticks with me. I'd heard that before. But that's what we want to try to do. We can't just shovel money out on people and expect that's going to change their life and fix their problems and help everything. But we need to be able to look back. From the future, we need to look back and say, this is what we've invested our resources in, and this is how we've changed lives, These are the investments that flow out of our heart that says genuinely, people matter to God. And they matter to me too, The second thing is that people are spiritually lost. They want something. People want something, but they don't know what it is. And what will make them happy, We need to ask them, what will make you happy? What brings you joy, What makes you happy? And the question that I have for you is, when will Jesus be enough? When will Jesus be enough? The third thing is that people need Christ. That's what they really need. As we shore up our evangelism-related values, we need to be thinking of ways to provide people with opportunities to get a taste of genuine Christianity, not this fake veneer stuff. They need to see genuine Christianity. And we must plan on bringing people in. Assimilation, if you will. Teaching them how to walk the talk, Not just say I'm a Christian, but be a Christian. The next thing is people need cultural relevance. They need to know that what we're doing is real. We wrongly assume that because we grew up here, because we know these people that are our neighbors and our friends, we wrongly assume that because we speak the same language and we wear the same clothes and because we drive the same cars, then there must be some sort of understanding among us. We know each other. The fact is, you don't know what goes on in my home at any given moment. And I don't know for you either. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. It goes on and on. We wrongly assume that if we know all of these other things, that there must not be any real distance or barrier between us, you know. So the cultural chasm, it consists of barriers that keep a secular person from hearing and understanding the message. These include things like language, like the way we dress, like our musical taste, like our personal motivators, like our cultural norms, like our habits, like our beliefs, our degrees of spiritual interest. Things like our style of learning, our traditions, both secular and religious traditions. The list could go on and on. But there's this huge chasm between us. Most importantly, though, what we're talking about to you today is that people need time. They need time. People need a moment to chew on what it is that you're trying to tell them. They need to get a moment to understand on their own what you think you already understand. Inherent in all of this is the fact that for most people today, the movement toward Jesus Christ is going to be a process. And this process is going to be one of trial and error. We're going to make mistakes along the way, but the fact is, you and I are called to be the church. He has called us to be Jesus in a society that doesn't want Jesus. That's why we are called Christians, to be Christ-like.
Good morning. Matt, I agree with everything that you just said, totally. But now we're going to put the faith into action. Okay? I just want to give you a summary of what's going on and some changes that we've made on Wednesday nights. A couple of weeks ago, I sat down with someone and here on the stage, and I just didn't know what to do. Our recreation time was just kind of, a run and play kind of a thing, and it really had me down to the point that I just didn't know what to do anymore. And so I travel a lot from my job during the week, and so I was listening to some radio station, and they were talking about missions. Have you ever had one of those moments where God just goes, I had one of those. I had one of those moments. So I come back to this person that I'm talking to, was sitting here on the stage, and I visited with them about some things that God had laid on my heart and put in my mind to start doing. And it was very well received by the adults. Several adults in here on Wednesday nights work with me. So here's what we thought. We're actually going to take our recreation time, and we're going to take those kids that we have on Wednesday nights, and we're going to put their faith into action. So we're going to do missions. Let me just say there's three types of missions, three main types of missions. The first one, and I'm going to put some faces up here that you can probably recognize. The first one is foreign missions. Lauren. They're in Mexico. She's in Taiwan now, right? Working in an orphanage. There are foreign missions, ones that they go clear across the sea or the ocean or whatever to get to. And I was telling the kids this, and you should see and hear some of the reactions that I got. The second one is in-country missions. Rachel served 10 weeks in Lorain County, Ohio as an MC. She taught Jesus 6 nights a week for 10 solid weeks. And let me just tell you this, Miss Rachel, I know you don't like to hear this, but the feedback that I got from the powers that be at Next Step Ministries, you're the best MC in the country. Local missions. Me in a hard hat. That's crazy. Actually, that's Brinley and Jasmine and myself. We're on a work site with Next Step Ministries building a house. Actually, we're rebuilding the house because it was a mess. So that whole side has been redone, and they have brand new siding and all that. That was a huge project, which will probably end this year. It's been a multi-year project. So there's foreign, there's in-country, and then there's local missions. Now, the fourth picture I have is, where do we fit in? Well, unless you want to fly to Taiwan, or you want to go to Ohio, I think probably we ought to stay in local missions. Local missions, there's plenty of local missions here, mission work to do. And just let me tell you this, our partnership with Water Gardens is a mission for us. Huge mission. There is plenty to do. Am I right, Pastor Don? Plenty to do. All right? Our partnership with Water Gardens, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just going to kind of go over the operations and how it goes. When they come in, there are only so many beds that they have. Is that correct? Okay. So I'm getting this from Greg. So he's telling me that there are only a certain amount of beds. And if someone comes in and they've already filled up those beds in which they have to work for, if those beds are already full, they have to turn them away. They turn them away, but before they turn them away, they give them a full belly, and if it's cold, they give them a blanket. Now, let me tell you this, that has got to be one of the hardest things to do, is to turn someone away, especially as cold as it's been at night. Those guys have to work, and ladies have to work for their bed, whether it be sweeping up the floors, cooking food, serving food. They also have what they call a worth shop. So they're roasting coffee beans over there now. It's pretty good coffee too, by the way. They're making bands, the paracord bands. They're also making lanyards. Our partnership is incredible. We do the visitation on Monday nights. Matt's going to be talking about that a little bit further. So here I am telling these kids about what's going to go on. So we're making blankets for these folks. We're going to start making blankets come this Wednesday, the fleece blankets. So I was telling them, all of this stuff that's going to happen, and this one little girl, and it just blew me away. She looked at me and she goes, you know what? That blanket can change someone's life. I'm like, how old are you? I can't get some adults to understand this. She goes, it's the little things that will change someone's life. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start making blankets. I also got permission from Greg that he's going to come over here on the 17th and actually talk to the kids about Water Gardens. And we're also going to start making paracord lanyards that they're going to be able to sell in the workshop. And that money goes back to helping other people. I'm excited. I have not been excited in a while about, honestly, ministry. Our partnership is incredible. So here I am talking about this, and they're like, well, we're going to do this and this and this, and they're all pumped up about it. And so I go in and I tell them the Good Samaritan, the parable of the Good Samaritan. Have you heard that? You heard it? Well, let me just tell you, run through it real quick in case you haven't. So Jesus was teaching, and this expert of the law stood up and he asked, what do I got to do to inherit the kingdom of heaven, eternal life? Jesus replied, what is written in the law, and how do you read it? So he goes in and he answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind. And here's where rubber meets the road, folks. Love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus replied to this guy, you know what? You're correct. Do this and you will live. And this guy, I can just see the arrogance. He stands back up and he says, well, who's my neighbor? He's trying to justify himself. Who's my neighbor? And one of these little kids on Wednesday night said, your neighbor can be someone you don't even know. I'm like, yes, you're getting it. Jesus tells the parable, goes into the parable of the Good Samaritan. He says a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and was attacked by robbers, and he was left for dead. This priest comes alongside him down the road, and he looks at him and he passes by him on the other side of the road. Didn't stop. Then a Levite saw him and again passed him by. But this Samaritan comes through and sees this man beat up, torn up, almost dead. He goes over to him and he bandages him up. He takes care of him. He puts him on his own donkey and takes him to this inn. And there again, he takes care of him. The next morning, he gives the innkeeper some money and says, take care of him, and if you incur any more expense, I'll take care of it when I come back. Then Jesus, in this story, he asked this arrogant individual, he says, which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man that fell in the hands of the robbers, that was left for dead? The expert said, one that had mercy on him. And here it is again. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. Go and do likewise. Folks, we're changing. We're changing our mission on Wednesday night for those kids. We're going to be doing serving others. We have a local mission that's right 5 miles from here, 4 miles from here, however far it is. It's time to get to work. These kids are excited. I'm excited about it. The adults are excited about it. And I'm going to leave you with this quote. I just read this book by Shane Claiborne. Now, I don't know how you feel about him, but it's a pretty good book. I'm going to leave you with this. And I think that's what our world is desperately in need of. Lovers. People who are willing to build deep, genuine relationships with fellow strugglers along the way, and who actually know the faces of the people behind the issues that they are concerned about. That's where it's at, folks. And that's the way we're going. This morning, when the invitation time comes, I would like to, if you're willing to help, if you're willing to donate, or willing just to pray, I'll be on this side. Come pray. Come talk. And we'll go a little deeper in.